Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Good afternoon to you. I want to talk about austerity and how it's impacting on people's lives, on all our lives, one way or another. This is because a study, a set of research by three of our big universities, really, Oxford, Cambridge and UCL, University College London, has concluded in very stark terms that NHS and social care cuts in particular are, quotes, economic murder. Now, that is a turn of phrase designed to get your attention, obviously. But is it true? Is it even bordering on true? This report says that Conservative policy, austerity in particular, and social care cuts by local government councils could cause 100 unnecessary deaths per day. Do you think that's true? Do you think austerity is literally killing people? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. It's interesting to hear the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell just a week away, or less than a week away now, from the budget, which we'll bring to you here at LBC, urging an end to austerity on a number of fronts. Whether he will get anything like it, we'll find out next Wednesday when the Chancellor Philip Hammond makes clear what the government spending plans are. But this report really caught my eye this morning. Already, it says 120,000 British people have died needlessly since 2010. So just in the last 7 years. This is according to this research by this joint study by Oxford, Cambridge and University College London. Aside from this study, you know as well as I do, because we hear it often on our programmes here on LBC, that there are those who say austerity is, more broadly, is without doubt killing people and certainly causing suffering that opponents of the government say they are turning a blind eye to. Universal credit, another case in point. Attempts in Parliament for universal credit, the full rollout of it to be paused, was defeated. And it will go ahead as normal. The government says it's getting people back into work. But again, critics of the rollout of universal credit say it is causing material harm to people, threatening people's lives. Do you think austerity is as deadly as this? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Obviously, your own personal experiences matter enormously here, whether you work in the health service, in the social care sector, whether austerity has materially and deeply impacted on the life of you and your family or someone you know. Give me a call, 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Councillor Izzy Seacombe joins me, Chairman of the Local Government Association's Community Wellbeing Board. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Sheila.
Do you believe that this is true, that hundreds are dying a day because of NHS and social care cuts?
Well, they are worrying figures, and we would certainly be concerned about them. And I think that concern would demonstrate that we would now urge government to review the evidence behind these figures, so that we can have more accurate assumptions of where this is going. So we are concerned about it, and I would like to know a little bit more and actually get some in-depth detail of whether this is actually the case, whether the evidence stacks up.
Well, because, the reason I pointed out the names of the three universities is, they're no slouches, are they? Oxford, Cambridge, University College London. They point to the fact, for example, and you'll have seen this close up, that spending on social care fell by almost 2% every year between 2010 and 2014. So broadly speaking, during the coalition government, tell me the impact that has had on what local councils are able to provide in terms of social care, because it's the over 60s mostly impacted, according to this study.
And it is, and of course, we're facing a double whammy in this, but because we've got spending that has been cut, and in the 10-year period 2010 to 2020, we're going to have seen a £16 billion cut in local government. That's local government, not just on social care, but bearing in mind that social care is the largest spend of most of our budgets. It is significant. And right now, right as we speak now, we have a 2.3 billion funding gap, which is facing social care by 2020, which we have been pushing for a very long time, that this needs to be resolved, and we need some certainty so that we can develop a social care that is fit for our population and fit for the future. And we have the budget next week, and we are urging the Chancellor to take this on and to head it up straight away and make that surety for us.
And I'm glad that in answer to the first question I put to you, you said, evidence, evidence, evidence. Of course we need evidence. That's why I'm saying, is this really true? A Department of Health spokesman, in response to this study, says it cannot be used to draw any firm conclusions about the cause of excess deaths. And we're talking 120,000 deaths since 2010, according to this study. And by the same token, this hour of radio won't prove exactly what the circumstances are behind these excess deaths. But anecdotal evidence tells us a lot, doesn't it? It tells us at least, it paints a picture at least of what people are facing.
Of course it does, and a lot of us, our day-to-day life is based on assumptions that we make, and the decisions that we make are very often based on assumptions, not necessarily on evidence. And it is absolutely right that when we are spending public money that you and I and the taxpayers of this country give, we need to give evidence to put it forward. So there's a basis of assumption, but there is also a real necessity to bring forward evidence and make sure that we know. But what we do understand as well, not just the money that we've talked about in social care, the gap that we have a growing demand. We are all living longer, which is excellent and very good news. We have a growing demand in our elderly population. We also have a very real growing demand in our working age adult. This is people who are living with learning difficulties, physical difficulties, these sorts of things, very high costs and long-term costs. So all of these pressures, we know. Those are the evidences that we know. And our belief is that we need to reverse the pressures by trying to keep them at home supported as long as possible.
Well, let's talk a bit then about the people in the care sector, the people working in the care sector, because this study says the squeeze on public spending, so austerity, and the drop in nurses since 2010 has put over 60s in particular, and care home residents in particular, most at risk. Now, let's talk about how those care homes and that care sector is staffed, because it's pay is often so low that care homes are closing, isn't it? The amount that a local authority is able to pay the care home that's delivering the service. Tell me more about that.
Yep, we've most authorities will have had contracts handed back to them,
by private operators who can no longer function.
Yes, and it's really true to say that we depend on the ability to contract with care homes or residential homes to provide the care that is needed. It's absolutely true also to say, and the evidence here is that we are keeping people at home for longer, supported in their own home when they need it.
Which is a good thing if it's the right thing.
It is good news, absolutely. So the general view is that when they get into a point where they need to go into a home, they're probably quite poorly and quite in need of care. So they will be entering in
or unsupported. Because often it's that combination of family and state that keeps people in their home. Without family, people end up in homes faster, don't they?
It is, and also it's a very true reflection as well to say that there are a lot of people who will be going into care homes who are not supported by the state. They are the self-funders in society, and there will be differences in the rates paid, and it is absolutely vital that we have that vibrant market as well as a marketplace for state aid and state supported. So we know how the system runs, and there is a certain amount of subsidy, but you cannot keep on doing this without having the surety of government funding that will allow us to stabilise the marketplace that we need to provide the beds for people who are in our level of care. And this is a growing number because we're all living longer. The general demand is greater.
Is your gut instinct, Izzy Seacombe, is your gut instinct that this study, while you might argue the figures around the edges, that it is onto something when it says that people are dying because of austerity?
I think it's emotive language, but I think that I would not wish to walk away from it. I would wish to understand better the evidence behind it.
But you don't reject it. You clearly don't reject it outright because you see.
I think it is quite accurate to say that the funding for social care has been at crisis for a long while now and is still at crisis. We have a £2.3 billion gap in our funding until 2020. That means that we are not able to supply £2.3 billion worth of support to people who need care homes, people who need home care, and people who are long-term disabled.
Thank you very much for talking to us, Councillor Izzy Seacombe, who's chair of the Local Government Association's Community Wellbeing Board. Think about that title for a second, Community Wellbeing Board. Understandably being cautious in the language that she uses, but do you believe that this report by Oxford, Cambridge and University College London that's saying that in the last, 7 years, 120,000 people have died prematurely or needlessly because of the cuts to NHS and social care. Do you believe that austerity is killing people? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. It's 16 minutes past 1. Just to let you know that after 1:30, I'll be joined here in the studio by General Sir Mike Jackson, former head of the British Army. That's coming up here on LBC in about 10-15 minutes' time, so do stay with us for that. John has called from the Isle of Wight, another John in Bristol, to talk about austerity, about cuts to the NHS and social services, and whether they believe a really startling message from a 3 universities study, Oxford, Cambridge and the University College in London, saying that it's killing people, that it's causing needless deaths. John, do you believe that it is?
Hi, Sheila. Yeah, I do. I haven't really in my life had an awful lot of contact with social care until a few weeks ago when I found a homeless man sleeping in the doorway of my office. And when I spoke to him, it was very clear to me he had very profound learning difficulties. And he was 59 years old, and he was incredibly vulnerable. And I thought, okay, well, I can fix this. I'll get on the phone and find some people in the local authority who can help him. And I spent hours and hours on the phone over a period of days, and nobody would help him, even though he was, an elderly man in very poor health, with very serious learning difficulties. Nobody could or would help him. And then it left me in a terrible position. I could either walk away from this man and leave him sleeping in the street with all his worldly possessions, or try to help him, because there is no safety net there to protect people like that. And I'm absolutely convinced if I hadn't intervened, that man would now be dead, because there is no one to turn to. Even all the charities, I put him in my car and drove him to different charities to see if they could help, and nobody could help him. And it was a shocking experience, because I've never come across that before. I thought there was always a safety net there for vulnerable people with profound learning difficulties, but for my intervention that day, that man would now be dead. I'm convinced of it.
And you were surprised, good on you for picking him up in the first place, John, but you were surprised, were you, that once you'd done that, it was so hard to find the help he needed?
There isn't anyone. So I spoke to, for example, the local housing officer, who was on the emergency number because it was a weekend, and she said, this man has no connection with this local authority. You have to have a 5-year connection with the local authority. We have no obligations towards him. I can't help you. Go away. And I said, even though he's got profound learning difficulties, I said, we don't have any statutory duty to help this man or look after him. We're just going to leave him to die in the street. And she said, well, I don't know what to tell you. We don't have any duties to look after him, and we're not going to. He doesn't have a 5-year connection with this area, and I don't know what to tell you. I called social services. I called mental health services. I called everybody that I could call. And in the end, I realised it was me or nobody. So
the thing is, you had no statutory duty to help him either, but you were. You know, we have to be more than our statutory duty, don't we, in life?
Of course we do. We have to do what's the right thing, and you can't walk away from somebody. I would no more have left that man lying in the street than I would leave a child lying in the street. He was completely and utterly unable to look after himself, and he still is. I managed to, with the help of some other people, track down a room for him, but the landlord couldn't let him in without ID, because in our attempts to make this a hostile environment for immigrants, you can't get a room without identification to prove you're a British citizen. This is a man who had been robbed when he was living homeless, rough in the streets of Bournemouth, had been robbed of his identity documents, so he had nothing to prove he was a British citizen. So in order, before he could move into a room, he had to sleep homeless in the street, sleep rough, for 2 more days, so that I could go onto the GRO website and order him a birth certificate. And I got a birth certificate for him, and then we got him into a room, and lots of very other people have contributed furniture and a TV and the things that people need to make a home.
And has he got support now?
Well, after it's taken me 6 weeks, I managed to get somebody from social services in to see him last week. We've got his benefits all sorted, or with the first week I met him, I took him to the DWP, and we got his benefits sorted. We got his housing benefits sorted. We got him registered at a GP, and he has some health problems, and those were just not being attended to, and some of them were potentially life-threatening. He'd been in hospital a few weeks before I met him because he'd literally collapsed in pain because he had a sore foot, and he was rushed. Other people called the ambulance because he collapsed in the street, and he was rushed to hospital, and they bandaged up his foot, and they sent him out the next day. And he hadn't taken his shoes off for weeks after that because he was homeless. And he had no identity documents, and he couldn't register for the GP because he had no identity documents, and nobody wanted to help him. And because he has profound learning difficulties and a number of other health problems, nobody is interested.
Well, and we know,
it's just trash lying in the street.
Yeah, and we know that access to health services can be very difficult for homeless people. But God, you paint an awful picture. You paint just a bleak picture, but for your intervention and the intervention of others. Now, do you believe that he now has a structure around him that can sustain?
Well, I hope so. The people that have come from social services have said that they agree with me that he's got profound learning difficulties and he needs a support worker. What he really needs is to live in sheltered, supported accommodation. This is not a man, he has no family, he has no living family. When social services were speaking to him yesterday when I was at the meeting with him, they asked him who his next of kin was. He asked me if I'd be his next of kin. He has nobody in the world. He has his parents are dead. He has a brother, he doesn't know where he is. He hasn't seen him in many, many years, decades. And he's 59 in 18 days' time, and nobody in the world would know if he died tomorrow, and that's a shocking situation. He needs to be in sheltered accommodation, but because housing is run by the local authority, local authorities can have their own individual rules, and they say, because he doesn't have a 5-year connection with this area, we won't help him. And that includes, even though he's got profound learning difficulties, so the best he's going to get is a support worker to pop in for an hour or two a day to make sure he's bathing. So although he's had a room with a bath, he hasn't had a bath since he moved in there in 5 or 6 weeks after sleeping homeless for 5.5 months on our streets. And it's not because he's mad or bad; it's because he's very, very vulnerable. But there's nobody there to protect people like that.
And how?
It's only if somebody advocates on their behalf. If somebody steps in and says, we can't let this happen. We can't allow this to go on.
And you're pretty sure
authorities are completely overwhelmed.
You're pretty sure that had you not intervened in the way that you have, lots of texts coming in praising you for doing so, that he would have just withered and died on the streets.
There's no doubt in my mind, because one of the things I rushed to get was an appointment with the GP because he was still limping very badly. And even now he's still running a temperature. I was with him yesterday, and he's running a temperature, and the ladies from social services that came yesterday could see that he's running a temperature, but he's back at the doctor's at 10:20 today. I think he may have diabetes as well, and a number of tests have been done. He's got terrible problems with his teeth, and I'm convinced he's got an infection in his teeth. And this is a 59-year-old man, a British citizen, who has nobody in the world to advocate for him. And if somebody doesn't, he would just have died in the streets because he was really quite unwell and very vulnerable. And there was nobody was helping him. He had presented at the local authority and asked for help, and they sent him packing.
That tells its own story, doesn't it? And John, are you his next of kin now?
I am now.
Officially?
I am now. Yeah, I'm next of kin for him. Yeah. Yep. And there's things to be happy about. I mean, I don't want to paint a bleak picture. He now has a room. He's registered with the GP. I got him a cash point card, the first one he's had in his life, and the people in Santander very kindly taught him how to use it. So he has access to benefits. His housing benefit is being paid. I'm going to get it organised so the housing benefit goes straight to his landlord, so he can never be homeless again, hopefully, so long as his forms are always filled in. He was in his room a few days. When he got a fitness for work assessment through from the DWP, like a 50-page form, I had to fill that in for him and send it back because they would have stopped his ESA. He was convinced that, oh, no, they won't do that, they won't do that. Yes, they will. They'll absolutely stop your ESA and leave you homeless and hungry indefinitely, and nobody will care. And this has happened to him before. It's happened to him before where he had no food for a week.
And John, what's your background? Are you surprised that you find yourself being essentially the brother to this man now for good?
Shit, I'm shocked and horrified. I didn't think this was the world we lived in. I really didn't. I'm not familiar with the social services or local authorities and what their statutory duties are. I just thought that there was a safety net for people like this man, that so long as he presented himself to somebody in a local authority and said, within minutes of speaking to this man, you would know that he's a profoundly vulnerable man with learning difficulties. Somebody in the local authority, when he presented as homeless,
would put him into a system that would lead him where he needed to be.
That's what I thought, but it's just not true. And that's only just in the last 6 weeks I've discovered that. And if people, the wonderful thing is people are very kind. So in the time he has lived in this area, people have come up to him in the street, recognising that he is vulnerable, and he has been given in cash, he tells me, £600 by kind people. But he didn't know what to do with it, so he took it to the bank and he paid it into the bank. He didn't know what to do with it because he had nowhere to go. He couldn't pay for accommodation. Nobody would let him across the threshold of their door. He couldn't even stay in a hotel because nobody would let him in.
So there was a blindness in a way. The willingness to help was there, but the authorities, the network that is meant to be there to help, was blind to him.
They don't have the resources. They don't have the people. There is just no resources to help people like him. And there's policies. I put a post on Facebook asking people to tell me what to do. What do you do in this situation? And some people came forward that were really helpful. A chap called Trevor from the Isle of Wight Soup Kitchen came forward and gave me an awful lot of help, and that really helped me find accommodation and get him off the streets. And but I had to take him to the Department for Work and Pensions, to their office, and they were pretty unhelpful, to be quite frank. I took him to the local authority to do his housing benefit forms, and they just said, oh, you have to do that over the phone. I said, this is a man who doesn't know how to use a phone. Oh, you can do them online. I said, he doesn't know how to use a computer.
Computer says no, left, right and centre. Yeah.
I had to cause a bit of a stink in the offices of the local authority to get them to give me a paper form that we could sit and fill in there and then. And, I have to ask this man all kinds of questions about his health and his background and stuff that I have no business asking him. But if I don't,
nobody else will.
His housing benefit paid. But, I'll give you the numbers. His rent is £100 a week. He gets £68.50 from housing benefit. I only knew this because I've done all his paperwork. He gets £68. So he has to find £31.50 a week to pay the balance of his rent. But he only gets £63 in employment support allowance.
Well, John, you have been a complete angel to him without question. I know you got help from other people as well, but it seems to me that your commitment to him and consistency with his story over the last 6 weeks has literally saved his life. And John, firmly of the belief that man, a 59-year-old man with learning difficulties on the Isle of Wight, would have died on the streets without those interventions by John. This was a man who had sought help from the authorities and didn't get it. Loads of you texting and tweeting to say what an incredible man John is. Sam in Redhill says, worst of Britain, that man's situation. Best of Britain, John. I'll leave it at that for now. Dave has called from Hertford to carry on our conversation about whether austerity is causing more suffering than we know, even, according to this study by 3 of Britain's top universities, killing people. Dave in Hertford, hi.
Hi there, Sheila. Good afternoon.
How do you see this?
Well, really, I'm the person that John was talking about just 15, 20 minutes ago. I could very easily have been the person that he was talking about. I have very similar issues. I've got bipolar disorder. I couldn't afford to stay in the flat that I was renting because I was made redundant. And I was sleeping in my car, I'm an educated man. I was running a department for a bank, and I went to the council. I found out that I needed to have 5 years worth of records with them, consecutive years.
Same as the man John was helping.
Yeah. I was missing 6 months because of homelessness between that. Because of a previous issue of gambling, actually. So they wouldn't help me. I had 4.5 years solid, apart from about 7-month gap. They asked me to prove all of my time that I was with the council. I couldn't, because I had no records, because I was homeless. I have no other documentation or anything, and yet I'd paid all of my council tax to the room pretty much next door to the office that I was going to see for homelessness. So they had all the records. They just wouldn't talk to each other. I managed to get all the detail together, and the bottom line is, Sheila, they did nothing for me, absolutely nothing. It was left to me to either do or die. Literally, I was either going to go one way or the other. I'm 55, and it literally was well, I didn't bounce off the bottom. I crawled along the bottom of the barrel before I could do anything to get myself out of it. And part of this is obviously austerity, and part of this is just the issue of homelessness. It's a very personal thing to me, and I totally understand the situation that John is in. I didn't have a John. I didn't have an anybody.
How did you do it in the end?
To talk. Well, the first thing I did, I decided the person at the job centre was marvellous to me. She was wonderful. She gave me so much encouragement, and that was the confidence I needed. It was just someone at the job centre that I went to sign for, and I managed to get a job, and I've just saved up the best I could. After I landed the job, I went to live with family. I've been with them for 7 months, and now I've just about got enough money together that I actually move into a flat on the 27th of my own for the first time in just over 2 years.
Congratulations.
But I'm very fortunate. There's a lot of people that aren't as fortunate as me, aren't as educated as me. You know, I've got bipolar, and cyclothymia, which is the sadness side of bipolar. I don't have the manic side. And I've thought about suicide over the last couple of years. I go to a psychiatrist every quarter now. I'm on quetiapine, which is a mood stabilizer. I've been a complete mess, but I'm so fortunate that, and the only person that I've been able to talk to about this, apart from the psychiatrist, was the lady in the job centre. It's shocking, absolutely shocking.
But your story and John's support for the man he found in the Isle of Wight tells me that actually, it's a lesson to all of us. All of us can be someone's angel, can't we? I don't want to get too, airy-fairy about it, because it's hard yards, isn't it, helping people? It's hard yards for you when you're being helped. Yeah. But we should all maybe open our eyes wider to people's needs, to people in trouble.
I think that's right, and I think there's two sides to that. Sheila, is that one is that you've got the person themselves. They've got whether they are in a position to reach out to be helped. Because I've been too proud to. I was a department of 21 people, and we had a shower at work, and I was showering at work and living in my car. I was too proud to talk to anyone, and it was living a lie, and I couldn't do much about it. And yet, on the other side of it, when people people know that I've got bipolar disorder, and know that I've got mental illness, but it's as much as I've got family that know and care and love, I guess, people don't really understand to talk about it, and because people don't understand, they tend not to. And I think mental illness has got a lot to do with it. There's a lot of sadness around, and there's a lot of people in desperate situations. And if there's any little nugget of a mental illness that's inside someone, it's very easy for that to come out. And I feel very sad for it. I'm definitely, when I'm not on my feet yet. I'm almost on my feet, because I will be on the 27th. But you know, I certainly, when I'm in a position to help someone, and I'm not at the moment,
you will do.
I definitely will. Oh, definitely.
I think you'll have a lot to offer them, Dave. I wish you all the very best in your new place as well. Thank you for your call, Dave. Loads of you. I'll keep reading some of these texts throughout the afternoon, actually. Lots of texts with your own experiences of austerity and how it's impacted on you. And Frank says, keep shining a light on the welfare shortcomings. Only this week, my friend found a 92-year-old woman collapsed in the street. Ambulance service said she needed to be taken to a walk-in centre, not a hospital.